Welcome everyone. Today we have beautiful Nellie joining us. How are you, Nellie?
Oh, good. Thank you, Gabby. It's good to be back. Thank you.
It is. It's been a while for both of us, and
Mm.
far out. We're both returning after a break, both being sick, both having really strange symptoms and ongoing just illnesses that dragged on. We thought it would be weeks into months, and we've both had new memories come through. And all right, it really just reminds me like it is such a marathon for all of us survivors remembering at this time, keeping our bodies together, taking care of our minds, taking care of our lives around remembering as well, because we've all got partners and families and jobs and commitments as well. And it's just such a reminder to me of how important it is for us to all take care of ourselves and just really have that self-care, which I think, Nellie, you're such a beautiful example of, taking care of yourself, and just the journey that we've been on over the last months with sharing your story. I just wanted to congratulate you on your healing, and we can just see you coming to life each and every time you come on and do an interview. And it's so beautiful to just see that journey of what it is to really start speaking out as a survivor. And I know you do so much of that to help other survivors, but it's beautiful to see that it's helped you as well. So for people that haven't come across Nellie, there's many, many interviews. I think we're up to number 10 at the moment.
Yeah,
So
10 years.
Nellie is a survivor of SRA, of MK Ultra and experimentation. She was born into a generational family and experienced horrific crimes carried out both on herself and on the other members of her family. And she's been recounting the many memories that she has integrated, just to give us a year by year overview of the tools that the cults are using to create a mind control slave. And it's been just absolutely mind blowing to really gain that big picture perspective of how they're really setting up this programming year upon year upon year. And I know today we were going to talk about Nellie's later teenage years, so when she was about 17 years old, and the programming that was used and set up, for her to be trafficked through brothels, which is such a horrific part of what happens in generational families. And whether it's a brothel or a generational child being trafficked, to acquaintances and friends and family, etc. It's something that so many survivors have lived through. So I know it must be a really hard thing to talk about, but I congratulate you again just on being so brave and courageous to share this with us, because I know it will help so many survivors with dealing with their own memories of trafficking and healing through those as well. So
I'd like to start with an acknowledgement to country. Um, so I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm speaking from today, in particular the Yagara and Turrbal people, and pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have passed their wisdom down to us in many ways. And this is something I've wanted to do for many interviews, but due to the trauma, I didn't get there, but I'm here now. I've done a lot of healing especially in the last 2 months, but it's thanks to you, Gabby, for a lot of yeah, just everything. You're just phenomenal, and the way that you come onto this platform and your integrity and your clarity and your groundedness, I don't feel like I could talk with anyone else in an interview. So I really have you to thank for that. And also my wellness journey, thanks to you and many others, doing a lot of supplements to clear a lot of the drugging for 50 years, which is a lot. Thanks a lot. Sunlight's a great healer as well that I've found. Being around positive people as much as I can while I'm doing this journey of interviews. It does take its toll. And I have good news that I now have my first full-time job in my life. So
Yay,
a lot
congratulations.
of things happened in the last few months. Feeling a lot more well. And it's thanks also to the Quandamooka, in particular, the women weavers who helped save my life many, many years ago, and taught me weaving techniques and traditional weaving that I now have permission from them to pass on, and that has been a true lifesaver. So I'm just everything is coming together now more than anything, and it's great. It's great to be able to get up and know that when I'm not feeling good and have like horrific memories and flashbacks, which still always happen, that I can just go straight out into sunlight and sit outside and weave, and it keeps you in the here and now, and it's such a healer. And now I'm able to pass that on to other people, carers in our community, unpaid carers, which is a beautiful job. It's my dream job. So
how beautiful. Well done. Congratulations on all of your hard work and perseverance with healing. Look at where it's taken you. It's just incredible.
it's true. Like when you look at my first interviews and how unwell I was, and it's been just a slow journey all year of reclaiming my life and living the life that I should have been living, which
Love
is
it.
great. So thank
Well
you.
done. Well done. My absolute pleasure. It's, nothing gives me more joy than seeing survivors just really bloom and take back their lives. And you are a brilliant example of that. So well done. Give yourself that credit because, you're the one that took the steps and put things into action. Like we can all hear things and learn things and do nothing about it. And you made it happen. So well done.
And other things like I've got piercings in my ear because my ears were so targeted by the organisation, which I have mentioned in the past. And I now have like piercings where I want them, not inside my eardrum, but on the outside that link to acupressure points, which helps with calmness and groundedness and to the vagus nerve, which really helps. So it's a slow journey, but I'm getting there, doing a lot of research, listening to what other people like yourself say, and just reclaiming my identity as well as my life and my health. And it's so important for other survivors that are just coming through to know that we can get there. It does take time, and to just weed out everything that comes at you or the advice to find that what fits you, basically. Yeah.
Incredible. And, after a lifetime of not having, your own mind completely, of, being a slave and, not having that identity, how beautiful is it to see, it seems like it's been a slow process and it's taken many months, but look at what you've achieved in, less than a year now. I think that's really incredible. And, for survivors to recognize that, when you take the steps and you make it a daily practice and you're doing the little things for yourself, it may seem like it's such slow progress sometimes, but in 10 months, look at where you can be.
It's those little moments that really do add up, and creating new memories out of the horror. It's so hard doing the interviews, but it's integral to our lives, and speaking out and letting others know what's really been happening underneath the surface that can't always be seen, but we can feel it and we can see some of it. And it's just so important, and only to speak out when you're ready, basically. When you're ready, you can speak out, whether you want to go on video or just have audio. Audio might just work for some people because there's a huge thing, even being on video. I find it a struggle because I was videoed most of my life. One of my handlers, my main handler, said that they had tens of thousands of hours of video of me, and that was from birth right through as a training module for others and things like that. It's horrific. So I do struggle with the video, but I think it's important for people to see my body language, to know my truth, and then make their own mind up about what they can believe in. I think that's really important.
I think, having the video too, there's a whole nother layer of communication because we learn so much from, the feeling and watching someone and seeing them communicate and really connecting with their energy. And, just listening to a survivor that has healed through a certain area, there's many survivors that I haven't connected with or met or interacted with personally, but when I listen to their videos, when they're describing how they healed through a certain aspect of their healing, it is incredibly healing. Don't ever discount like how healing it can be just to sit there and actually, listen to that testimony. When that information sort of comes into your body and your mind, it's just incredible. So well done on challenging yourself just to speak out publicly, because it is hard. I can completely, agree with that. I was absolutely terrified of being on videos. It's completely not the kind of thing that I would want to do. I'd much rather, be in the background helping, but, God sort of put me up to this and said, someone needs to start doing this. So here we are.
Yeah.
And I think if you challenge yourself, and you bring forward, what you feel, is healing for yourself and for others, we get that support, the opportunities open up, etc. as well. So it's incredible just how much we can grow, if you take that first step. And it can be really hard, that very first step, but look at where it can lead to as well.
It's right. Yeah. Sometimes we also feel like we can't breathe, like we have the weight of the world on our shoulders because of what we know. And sometimes I feel like I can't breathe because I have so much to get out and I've only just really started. And to the viewer, maybe take notes if you need to from now on, because it gets quite hectic and quite chaotic. There's a lot of information going to be coming out from now. So I would recommend for some people take some notes if they really want to follow what's about to come out. Today I'm going to be talking not only about my trafficking, but also my second mission, which was my first major mission, which was Chernobyl. And that's going to be quite a difficult one to talk about. That's later in this session. And yeah, it started with, I think I talked about in an early interview, I was given the book Chicken Licken to read, and how the sky was falling down on me, my father said, and the weight of the world. And we feel that was a very young age that happened. I was 3 or 4. Wow. And felt that that's the programming that we will get about what they're doing to this world. And hopefully there'll be someone out there that will know what to do. I know that eventually I will get a petition going for the police to start testing for scopolamine, which I have mentioned in the past, and I think that will be quite integral to something happening out of this. Yeah, it's going to be a hard road from now on. There's a lot coming out starting today, and I will be jumping to 1997 and 2011 in the next few interviews because they are quite important, rather than going in a chronological order. I will be potentially reading from my statements as well, because the wording has to be completely right with what I'm bringing out. There was also the book that I mentioned before, The Day of the Triffids, that I was given to read when I was about 7, and how my father said that not only I would be not able to leave the house and go outside, but the rest of the world would. And that was about just being through as well. So that was back in the 1970s. So everything that I've been talking about has been pre-planned and more. Like I was told in 2011 that they had planned another century ahead with what was going to be happening. And I was taken on many, many what they called missions, where I was walked through as a witness to what they were doing, to be there, or the setup of it. Huge stuff, huge explosions, which is quite terrifying. But I will get through. I'll start with today. I'm just going to start with my whole thing with being called the witch was for me to be stood with the plant knowledge from a very young age, stood to watch what they were doing with the plant knowledge that was now in their hands. As a witness, not able to move, not able to help anybody, which is a real Nazi thing as well. and to just be walked through and seeing all the murders that they did and the people that they set up to go to jail for it, and all of that throughout my life. And I'm talking about hundreds of events that I was taken to. That it's going to be a process bringing them all out, but I have to honour each and every person that was a victim of that. I have that responsibility. No one is more elevated than the other. Everyone deserved to have a life.
Yeah.
It will be a process. I do have to jump to 1997 and 2011 though, pretty soon, possibly from the next interview onwards, and then come back to the chronological again. But it's quite important to bring all that out. So even like now I'm reclaiming plants in my life with the weaving, which is beautiful. Making poultices to help things like on my body, because my body was so wrecked and tortured, as many of us survivors know and have endured. I was also called a spinster by my father, that I would one day be the spinster, which had multiple meanings. So that was kind of like in reverse of the Sleeping Beauty. So Sleeping Beauty was put to sleep for many years. And then I was also, in a way, put to sleep with my mind being washed with the drugging. And then I was woken up to having all my memories back, to having everything back, which is what they do to some of us, not all of us. Many people will go through certain elements of what I've been through and die or be killed or whatever, and have no idea their whole life of what they were used for. It's just so potent, the drugs from the plants that they do and manufacture and make into chemicals that they use on us. It's just phenomenal. And it was said to me, I think I've said this before in interviews, that they were the only ones using the scopolamine in the world, basically. And anyone else that was, they would kill or make work for them. And they didn't worry about South America because, as they laughed, said they just kill their own, use it for robberies and things like that, which is quite horrendous. So now connecting with plants, which is a beautiful thing, reconnecting or connecting for the first time. I wasn't even through my life even allowed to tend to plants, to have house plants, because they would have died when I was put to sleep all the time. So I wouldn't have been able to. And then in the later years, when they started to bring me out and I had a few herbs and things, they would kill them and give me shame that I had killed them, even though I hadn't. I wasn't awake enough to look after things. So everything had a meaning. Everything that they did had many, many meanings.
But it's so sad hearing, just the manipulation of what they have done with plants. These are beautiful parts of God's creation, and they have manipulated them. They've taken the knowledge of how to use them and completely used it against the people. And pharmakia, pharmacy, the pharmaceutical industry, it's another word for spell. It's the word for spell in Greek, and that relates to the witch idea that the cults are using as well. And it's so sad that so much of this incredible knowledge of the people in how to heal and how to use these plants for goodness was taken into the cults and weaponized, just as the military does today with everything as well.
That's right. And also it was said to me that in the 1970s, one of the main programmer handlers, Cells Imposter, said that only 0.17% of people were actual psychopaths, but they have actually raised that in people's eyes by making people psychopaths, by doing all the murders and placing a person at the scene to see some of it in some ways and be programmed to think that they had or not, and be put away and incarcerated without a voice, even when they knew that they hadn't done it.
Wow.
They've done that, so they've raised statistics, and that was part of what they were doing way back then, for many decades, many decades now. And I know now that I've lost my chance as a adolescent to even choose my own calling, which may have been to study botanicals. But it's never too late. I wanted to say to survivors, it's never too late. Now in my mid-50s, and I'm reclaiming my life, what's left of it. And that's important for survivors to know that that can be done. There's a lot of years lost, a lot of decades in my instance, and potentially theirs, but keep going. You've got a voice, you've got a story, get it out there.
Absolutely. And that's got to be the greatest victory, is taking our lives back.
The
enemy.
The life that you want to live, not the one that was chosen for you or put on you. I even have someone I call my spiritual daughter. It's good to reclaim what you need if they take your children off you and create those rifts, which is what they do. They set up so much to turn families against each other, and they all think it's real, because what they will do is they study human psychology, and they get the little things that really do can make sense or not sense to people, but program them either way to be against somebody. And it's heartbreaking as a mother. And it's a slow process to get that back, to get those connections back. And you'll have, like in my case, 8 years lost of my children, well, all of it because things were happening that I can't talk about. And you think that you're a mother and that you're awake all the time, and you go to sleep and you wake up the next day. There's not necessarily that many days that happens. They will program you to think that a whole year's gone by and you've been awake 365 days of that year, but in fact you might have only been really awake or with your children maybe 20 or 30 days out of that per year.
Horrific.
Some days may be split into 3 or 4, so that they will take you to something or have an event created, come home, you feel tired, you'll go to sleep, you'll put under, you're woken up again, and it's the same day, but they'll program you to think that it's another day or that a week's gone by. It's incredible. And they always put blockers in. You can't even, you're so in the now that you don't have a past, you don't have a future. Very hard, unless they plant a memory in you for that instance, for that. Part of today, I'm going to be going back a little bit more into my childhood again, as I do. And I do apologize about that, but sometimes there's more things that will come up that are important to talk about, to show more of the system and structures that they do from childhood to children. Be talking about the trafficking and Chernobyl. Some of the things that they do is with the handlers that were put around me that weren't the handlers. They were like Selwyn Leeks, for one, was one, even though he was an awful, evil man. They have impersonators of them. So I had Leeks imposter. There was another one called Pisani. So there was a JP Pisani that was working at a hospital in New Zealand, and he had an imposter pretending to be him. So all through my statements, I make reference to Leeks being the main person, and it wasn't right up to the very end of the statements before I left 2 houses ago, when I was still being accessed, that I realised and had memories and was given memories that it wasn't him. It was the imposter that they have. So they kept a lot of things till the very, very last minute in my statements, which is quite important. And also with the names Leeks and Pisani, and Pisani was from Malta, and there was a lot of talk by his imposter about revisiting Malta and being out of the country and things like that that were said to me. So it was a lot of confusion as a child trying to follow their story. But they also have connotations with leaks, take a leak, pisani, piss. This is what they think of humanity. A lot of things to do with shit society. They don't like the society that they were born in. They want to make these massive changes. And they have been well on their way for a long time, under the radar, under people's noses. So this is the kind of cryptic language also that they will use as a anti-humanity thing. Even I can remember as a child, my father teaching me to wipe myself from the back to the front with that. And that's how I was taught to wipe myself until I corrected that many, many years later. So that kind of thing. And that's putting the shit near the birth canal, which is what they've used. This is so sick. I'm sorry.
Just any way to degrade life.
So degrade what they do.
Yeah, any way to degrade it. It's just so horrific.
And I saw him do that to other children that were in my care as well. He would do the same to them. And then you'd think that they had messed themselves. So it goes through that they do it to all the generations. They keep a lot of the same things, but and then they'll do more computer age things nowadays and things on screens as programming for people and children. Whereas back in my day, it was more books. That's what we had. We didn't have the screens. Books, nursery rhymes, things like that. Movies, Alice in Wonderland, things like that.
Yeah.
And important days like special occasion days. And they attack tourism, consumerism. They see it as a waste. Many events I was taken to, they would mock holiday makers. They didn't like the way that the planes and everything were adding to the ozone problems and things like that, and or the climate change thing that they were doing, which will come back into 2011. So that's where they think they were doing the right thing by killing a lot of the populations. And more to come on that as well with their plans, which is why I'm going to be jumping to 1997 and 2011. And another memory is, I think I've talked about being in the car after Stephen shot the chickens, and then Christopher was given the gun to shoot, and I couldn't even lift the gun because of the drugging was in mine, to be called a beta slave. And I remember in the car when I was trying to get away from him, he was saying, I hate girls. And I remember Sel's imposter was saying, oh, I love him. He's me. He reminds me so much of me at that same age. So this was the level of programming. That having the children, me and Stephen Simon, as he was. I didn't know his name till my twin brother introduced me to him at age 28. Before I knew his name was Simon. So it was always kept from me, his name, even though it was Stephen while he was at the school. Then I was programmed to forget his name all through. So I didn't know his name for a long, long time after that. But I still refer to him as Stephen for a certain period of time, and then Simon. It was my twin brother who actually said his name, and he was completely under when he was in our house that I was living with my twin, age 28. So this is like the highest level key, the thought replacement, complete thought replacement. So it's like emptying you out. So you're like an empty submarine, and then you're filled with their complete thoughts and not your own. Yeah. And they can even do things. One of my triggers, which also kept me silenced, was around age 9. They had me on a beanbag in a house, because they always use other houses or other motels, not just your own house, not just Lake Alice, places like that. They'll use rural properties to do your programming, hotels, motels, rooms, wherever, because of the electric shock spikes and everything. So they do across the board.
So, so with that, do you mean they need to move around so it's not picked up that they're using electricity? Is that correct?
Yeah, the huge electric shocks that they use. So that's one of the reasons why they move around a lot and get the whole place under. They have certain people already programmed to go in and fill the rooms. They're all under. It's a huge operation, but they have many, many men that will do this. So it's easy. They can have a whole town under pretty easy. It doesn't take long at all. The bar, getting people to go in, they've all got drug drinks, and there's 100 or 200 or 300 people, or a festival, seeing them at the Big Day Out Festival on the Gold Coast with the whole bar, and everyone's under. Like, that's mass populations that they can do. Mass, and they do. And they also take certain drugs in, get people, drug dealers, to pass out drugs that will kill the adolescents and young people because they're so potent. So there's a lot of that happens. So the deltas were definitely different, trained from the beta slaves. Definitely, they had a lot of the men treat them very kindly, and when you're a younger boy, especially in like normal gangs and things, and they've done a lot of study on this. This is part of their ascending into the more political and military warfare that they've done. They will start their children young, and they will give them like mentors, role models that will treat them kindly. And it's just like in normal, like whether it's low socio-economic or higher socio-economic, if the child has been ignored or the parents are on drugs or alcoholic or into sex or not giving the child, or even the opposite, like smothering the child and they suffocate and want to get out, there's always someone older that they will gravitate to that will make them feel heard and seen. So this is the same kind of model that they'll use, but just another 100 levels up, where that's why they want to impress the older men.
It's grooming, really, isn't it? Essentially, it's grooming these children to get access.
The beaters, And my father also spoke in 2011, and also an aunt of mine gave me information. He questioned, was he into the Rosicrucians? She thought he was. So this is all the messages given to me through other family members, which happens. It wouldn't just happen through my programming. It would happen with people around me always coming to give me messages and directions to do something. I was completely controlled. Brothers, hierarchy things, friends that were put around me, often truth serum. So if I didn't give the right response to somebody, they would go back and be downloads for the mistake I had made. I'd be punished, or they would be punished sometimes if they hadn't. Like, this is the children, the friends around me. But back to my father, he mentioned the KKK. So they go through all these groups, the Italian mafia. They get to know the way that they operate, everything they all do, or every single level does. Every single generation of the Deltas goes through all these massive groups around the world. The Knights Templars, they get to know all their system, how they run, and this is how they ascend into this higher organization, the highest in the world.
So would you say, would they actually spend some time within those individual cults? Actually picking up their rituals and the way they work.
That even my father, I mentioned Anton LaVey in the 60s, and also with that San Francisco bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, that he always had hanging in every house that we were at, and he'd look at it gloating and smug, because he was the reason for the spike in the 60s of the suicides over that bridge, where they were throwing a lot more of them over, and that was my father's job, one of his bigger jobs, besides the shooting of a president that I've spoken about before. And these are the things that they have to do in order to ascend. That's why they're called Ascension Masters now. They were from the Zodiac, and everything is timed. to the millisecond.
Mm-hmm.
It's complete control. And it was said to me, no one gets out of the Illuminati alive. That was said to me in 2011 as well. And I remember at that time, I had the thoughts programmed in me, I might as well just suicide. There's no point in even trying to get through all this. So that's more of the programming that they gave me. But I've worked through that in order to be able to talk about all this now.
Well done.
Yeah. But I was also born Year of the Monkey. So I was born in 1969. At the very start of it, before it turned into Year of the Rooster. And that was another deliberate birth. I was birthed deliberately, artificially inseminated, all of that, part of a twin. But I would always have the monkey on my shoulder. So not only am I bringing this out, they would make it so I'm always looking over my shoulder, even when life gets good, that something really major and bad will come. No matter how high people go in the world, and you can see this in Hollywood and all the performers that they have there, the puppet singers, they go so high.
So controlled.
Michael Jackson, people like that, and then they bring them down. They bring them down huge, public shaming, public hatred, and then they
Destroy
kill
them.
Yeah, it's awful what they do, and they do it because they can, and they do it because they have to in order to ascend, all sorts, and they do it because they enjoy it. Many, many reasons. And they do it because they think it's part of their big mission, their purpose in life, their ideology, to control the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Really like little boys playing God, isn't it? Just trying to control everything from, an individual's thoughts to the entire world stage. It's just
Micro to the macro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they do it. And anything political, infighting here, splitting people up into we're pro this, we're anti this. It's all part of it as well. And we've seen it like
all a big stage show, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So they were saying that they're the only ones working with scopolamine way back in the 70s. So this is the key to running everything basically, because, and I'll get to more of this in 1997 when one of the master programmers was telling me all about how they think that they're magicians, but there's a better word for that. The designer killers came in and all that. It made them feel like they were invisible because they can put people under scopolamine. And I've seen people even standing under scopolamine with handlers around, so if they sway too much, they'll help so that they don't go down, or they go down gently if they don't want people to be bruised and things like that. But yeah, it can make them go right through whole buildings and everything and be completely invisible. This is how they can get into nuclear sites, but they'll even bring into public consciousness things like New World Avenue murder, Coronation Drive, massive thing that happened there about in 2018-19, men running around with guns, meaning the coronation of their new king within the organisation that I spoke about in my statements, which I'll bring in later. So they'll even thumb their nose through the media with their names. Even the supermarket that I spoke about in New Zealand was called New World. This is way back in I think its inception was the 60s and 70s. And they control the people that run these supermarkets unwittingly. And they were called New World supermarket. So that was back in New Zealand, which was their base, besides Australia, for many decades. After the World War II, the Nazis came there and changed their accents so that they could exist in, and they're very good at that. One of my first memories I've spoken about is the man that I called CIA with a big face, and he would say that he was American, and he'd say it in a real American language. And then, yeah.
So interesting.
And that's when they had brought Mengele there as well to be sitting in his, they even had him dressed up in his military suit. a military suit
Mm.
in the room in
Yes.
Fielding, New Zealand.
And Australia and New Zealand would be the last place, surely, that people would be looking for Nazis, right? They did a really good steal moving into these countries.
That has to do with Antarctica too, which I'll get to soon. Huge mission there. That was my first big mission that I was taken to. So going back to childhood a little bit, there was a lot of humiliation, things that were done to me. One in particular that stands out to me today is I was taken to a public pool, a local public pool. My mother had a handler there and she was going between me and him, man in a suit, lots of children in the pool. And my mother was forcing me to wear a blue, pale blue, frilly shower cap at the public pool. And it didn't take long till other children noticed. And then all of a sudden I was sat there on the pool, on the side of the pool. I didn't want to get in. I wasn't allowed to take the cap off. My mother kept coming back from the handler and telling me I wasn't allowed to take it off in a very stern voice. And I had to sit there while all the children eventually noticed and started pointing and laughing. And this also is played out in like MTV awards and things like that, where there'll be a singer that's dissed on publicly in front of somebody, and that's humiliation in another scale. But I wasn't a singer, so I wasn't part of that. In fact, for many years of my life, most of my life, I never ever sang. I wasn't allowed to sing. So we weren't allowed to have that joy of singing or the expression. And my ears were so damaged anyway. I was tone deaf. I still struggle to sing because I wasn't allowed to sing.
Humiliation is used as such a powerful cult programmer, and
Mhm.
you know, I've seen it working with survivors. In it really causes this block from survivors, you know, trying new things, or you know, to learn something new. You're going to have plenty of times you're going to fail. Do you know what I mean? Like that's part of learning. Like you look at a little baby trying to walk, they fall down a lot as they get started. But because of this humiliation that's been programmed into survivors as children, survivors as adults will often like hit a bit of restriction, or you know, a bit of pushback or a challenge, and they just can't do it, can't be done. Do you know what I mean? So it's such an important, you know, program for survivors to be aware of, that you know, if you sort of feel defeated or overwhelmed, or you know, when things go wrong, you start going into this mentality like, this always happens to me, you know, everything always, you know, goes wrong. That's a program. Get rid of that, because it's not true.
Absolutely. And I also had programming with humiliation where I was around between 7 and 9. I'm not too sure. I think it was closer to 9. One of the houses they took me to for huge electric shocks and programming, I was put on a beanbag. And I remember coming to, and Sol's imposter was there with my father. And I had drugging put through my system as well. And there was a trigger. And then he was like, there it is. And it was like a massive red rash would come up my neck all the way up, even over my arms. And that would be like an affliction that I had for many decades. It would just be, and I couldn't control it. And even people would notice.
Yeah.
And I would feel programmed to feel, oh, people know that I'm thinking bad thoughts or something, or that I'm guilty about something. Someone would say, oh, this has gone missing or something like that. So many scenarios happened all the time. I would have this rash and it would look, I'd feel like I was looking like I was guilty, even though I wasn't. I would stand up to do public speaking in school and I would be terrified because I knew that I'd have this rash. Everyone would see it. At school, I tried to tie my tie really high so it would hide it, but you could still see it. So this is an affliction that they actually trained in me through the drug.
A body response.
A body response. And I would see it normally with people under scopolamine and other drugs would make them very flushed in the face. But this is another level of that.
Yeah.
And when I look back at my life now with all the memories, I can see, oh, that father was under, because he was all red, and my father's just about to go and target his children. And yeah, it's a sign. It's a I called it for many years the ketamine rash.
Wow.
To do with ketamine, when you get that flush. Yeah, you can also get it a little bit with kava. I had some kava not so long ago, and I noticed that that brought it on. So they may have put a bit of kava in that as a trained response too.
Maybe that was part of the mixture.
It gave me a lot of anxiety for many, many years, and it kept me silenced. It made me want to hide. And it's a way of also ensuring that I wouldn't ever speak out about anything.
Silencing.
I was ever programmed to be around police who are also under and try and tell a story, try and tell my story and in bits and pieces of what I knew at certain ages from 2015 onwards. That would come up as well. So I was still under then as well. And I've even had them when I was being stalked a lot, and I went to report some of the stalkings when I became more aware of them, and they made me very aware of it. The men were all around me, especially that I could see in 2016 onwards. That would come up, and they would say things like, the police would say, "You need to go and see your doctor. We don't believe you. Go and see your doctor. You've got anxiety. You're making it up," things like that. But I wasn't allowed to be around anyone unless they were under. So that was my life. Yeah, but that was just showing to me, no matter what you do, they're not going to help you. And my father would even say that to me, and other members would say that to me as well from a very young age. Talk about the police. One of my little brothers had like a little metal police motorbike with a policeman on a metal bike, and that was also given to one of my family members, generations. And he would say, the police will never help you. And I would also know, I'd also have a program thought, I need to get to the police. I won't make it. By the time I get down the road, I'll drop to the ground.
So many strategies to stop you from getting help.
They told me in about 2005 that they leave no stone unturned, and they dot every I and cross every T. There's nothing that they haven't thought of that could happen that they won't block. That's how meticulous this organisation is, to the tiniest little detail. This is what we live through. There's no way out. That's what I'm basically trying to say. There is no way out of this. You're controlled by the drugs, you're controlled by the shocks, you're controlled by the thought control, you're controlled by all the handlers. And there was also a series that my father used to have me watch in the 1980s called Minder. I don't know if you know it. It had a crook called Terry in it, and a minder. And he used to look at me and smirk, and I used to wonder why he was smirking, and it was because everywhere I went, I had minders.
Right.
If I was programmed to go out the door, I had a minder, or many. They would be dotted all the way with the route that I was sent on. And this is another thing about the Zodiac that they don't know, a lot of people don't know. Before the lovers, to start with, who they targeted, went to the special resorts or beaches or lakes, they were already programmed to go there. They were already under, and they got killed easily by the Zodiac killer who was wearing that. And my father.
You're talking about the Zodiac murders, right?
Yeah.
How they were often, they deliberately chose couples.
They were already programmed in their houses for weeks, months before that. And they were actually programmed to go there before they went there. They were already under. Wow. Yeah. That's the extent that they went. They just didn't go there by chance and just happened to be there. They were programmed to go there for their killing. Yeah. That's the extent that this group went to. And that was way back in the 60s, 70s, 50s, the Black Dahlia, all of that. That's the extent that they'll go to. So, yeah, there was another thing that my father did quite early on as a child to me and my younger, most tortured brother. He got one of those little empty spools that you wind cotton on, and he put a candle on one side and a toothpick on either side and wound it up, and it would go, like it would move. And he would say, make connotations, that's like your brain. We're winding up your brain like that with the elastic band. So every little toy that was given had a meaning. Even I was given a little thing of clay, and it was called DAS, D-A-S back then. And my father would come in and he'd say, look in your wardrobe. And I didn't have many things in there that was in there at the time. And he'd say, look at that. It's called DAS. How stupid. And he said, what's DAS in reverse? Because they do a lot of things in reverse. So what's DAS in reverse? You're sad. You're sad too. We're making you sad. And I was always sad. I was a sad child because I was taken to so many murders and then having to go to school and try and connect with other children who were also under. So anyone could do or say anything they liked to me. And they do this to so many children, and then have them go to jail for things that they didn't do.
Yeah. See, the scope of these programs and the amount of people involved is just mind-blowing. You know what I mean? To understand how much this is actually occurring. And you're talking about, obviously, this happening in your childhood, but it's still happening today. And obviously things are so much further advanced as well. It's just...
Yeah, they really do play with a lot of things, and they have fun, like, you know, especially with family breakups and family sagas. And even recently, even more, the more bizarre, you just know it's them, like the mushroom family saga and things like that, you know, picking mushrooms and having a dinner and things like that. So it's like they can do it to anybody. No one's exempt if they've got their eye on you. And that's what Facebook and everything like that set up, so that it's just like a mass collection of people and data and everything. That's what they're doing. And my father set up Facebook for me in 2007. So he was letting me know that, yeah, they were controlling it, and I'd set it up. He said often, and many of the other handlers and program masters said, that they had brought things out to the world that could have been brought out many decades before. Many decades. They could have brought things out. And then they'll have a front person bring something up, bring something out, but it's really them in the background that's done it. And it's all for a reason. I remember also being taken out the back of the place that we moved to in Martin, the second town that we lived in, and it was just me and my younger, most tortured brother. And I remember the grass was really yellow, and it was summer because the sun was quite hot for New Zealand. And he was telling us to run, and looking at a road far away, and we'd have to run through the cow paddock. And I knew not to run. I knew it would be punishment.
Wow.
He left us there for a while, and I just knew my little, most tortured brother was out to it. I knew that even then. And then he came back and led us back home, ordered us back into the house where I have no more memory. So they would just put you under again. Just all this training would happen that you couldn't run, you couldn't go anywhere.
Sounds like they were just constantly testing their programming as well, right? Like trying to get you to do the wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also a test for other people. So they would train all their rookies and new people on me as well. And then they'd be able to go and do other family members and children, the new ones. So I was like, I had it coming at me all the time as a testing ground. Yeah, it was said to me also that I was the favourite daughter because of the godfathers, but there was another favourite, and I dread to think who that was. And even things like all the food on my plate and our plate had to be eaten to get the right dosage. So it was always, and lots of families would say, you need to finish your plate, you need to finish all your food. So there's all stuff that they would bring in that could be normalised, very normalised, but there was an ulterior motive with everything with us. So we had to eat all the food on our plate because it had all the drugs in it, and it had the right dosage of drugs. The drink, if my father gave me a drink, I would have to finish it. It would have to be all of the drink. It's quite a luxury for me nowadays to sometimes, I don't do it very just to leave something on the plate and not have to finish it.
Yeah.
It's
wow.
a bit of training, bit of retraining that you have to do. It's constantly, it's everything basically in your life you have to think about, and you have to question it. Why am I doing it this way?
Yeah. Being
Yeah.
aware of your behavior, your patterns, your thoughts is such a powerful way of deprogramming, and you've really mastered that, which is amazing.
Thank you. It's
Mhm.
hard work. I have to say that to survivors. It's really hard, but it's worth it in the end. And you can feel a sense of empowerment when all your power was taken. It's those little moments that can make you have more joy in life. And even the word joy, it was like my name was Julia back then. It was like Joy, because Y was a big thing. Y, the Y chromosome too, which I'll bring out one day in the future, and what they're doing with that, to do with the birth process.
Mhm.
But yeah, even joy, the word joy, Joy. It's like everything had a connotation with them.
Wow.
So I went and bought a joy perfume because I was programmed to have a joy perfume back then, by a person. It was from the war too. It was apparently a wartime perfume that came out where people had nothing but they had to have joy perfume. So I recently went and forced myself to buy a joy perfume, even though it could really trigger me, and reclaim that. And I've only worn it twice now before I'm going to something very, very happy, as a way of trying to reprogram and retrain myself with everything that they programmed against me. And it's a process, it's a step-by-step process. And with me going through 50 of my years with them, under them, hopefully I'll have another 50 where I can do what I want to do, and it'll be a process of reprogramming everything
For
that they
you. For
first 50.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
For your freedom. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I remember, the very few times that I was allowed to be angry at my father was, I believe it was when I was brought back from Antarctica, which I'll get to soon. Again, more memories about that. I was promised a Cindy doll, which was back in the 80s. And I remember me telling my father, which never happened, you are going to buy me a Cindy doll, because it was like a reward for me for what I'd been through. I didn't know this though, but it was programmed that I was going to get the Cindy doll because I had no toys, I had nothing. But I was telling him in like a bossy voice, and he was, for the first time, not getting angry at me or abusive or terrifying, because he's extremely terrifying, and took me out with the family to get me this doll. And they would all even bring things in, like I think I was about 12, 11 or 12. And my aunt, my favorite aunt, the one that I was allowed to have around me, came to the house, and she'd made monarch butterflies out of
Wow.
plastic with ink around them, heavy enamel. And these were given to me and my brothers. They didn't want theirs, these were blue. Mine was, I had a red one, of course, and a green one, which was my suicide. I remember looking at them and hating them, even though I had no memories that I was a monarch slave, because they kept that from me and all the little memories about that for many, many decades. But I remember hating it, hating them. It
I
was
find it so incredible that children are so intuitive. Do you know what I mean? Like, you didn't have your memories of being a monarch slave, but you knew immediately to hate that you
yeah.
didn't want it around, right? Like, it just
Mhm.
shows that, even though they tried to mind control you so much and program you, there was still something inside of you that was like, no, that's not right.
Could have been the thoughts that they gave me too.
Yeah.
I had the thoughts as well, but yeah, I knew inside me I didn't. It made me feel like
Yeah.
when I looked at them, I didn't even want to hold them. I put them down. I looked at them. I couldn't stop looking at them because they would make you very focused on something. But yeah, it made me feel very sick and unnerved. And there's something bigger here. Like I knew, like that could have been a thought that they programmed in me, but I just remember that there's something bigger about this. I don't like it. It's awful. It's horrendous, but I can't go there. And it would just go bang, shut down. So it's almost like a drawbridge gate just slamming.
Yeah. And those triggers are used in survivors' lives, aren't they? Just to continually keep them in amnesia. It's just like no, a barrier constantly being reinforced.
Complete barriers. Yeah. Another thing, just before I start talking about the heavier stuff, was it was very important that I meet a second cousin of mine. And my father set up a meeting with other family members. And I was about 16. It was just before I left that hometown and was put permanently into a brothel after Chernobyl. And it was very important. He said that I meet this cousin, and he later took me to her murder. So he had it set up in a garage, her garage. She was a spina bifida baby, and she's a bit older than me then. She'd lived. Her mother loved her very, very much. And she decided to be independent, or programmed to go and get her own place, be independent, a bit older. This happened a little bit like when I was in my 20s. And my father had the big hose set up with the exhaust from the car and the windows, and had her going in and out and talking to her, and had her write something or write things down. And that's the thing about, it's a push-pull with coming forward about this, because you have to be so careful with the families that have lost their loved ones. Sympathy. And believe that it happened a certain way. And have come to terms with that, or not come to terms with that, and have grieved and are now living a life. And then you're opening up picking open that wound, and you have to be so careful as a survivor doing this. Such
an awful situation, because it just should never have happened, right?
The parents,
like, how do we make right out of something that should have never happened? We can do, what we feel.
Talking about this now because her parents are no longer alive. They passed recently, but you have to be so careful about how you, and often I will talk in cryptic language, which is how I was programmed anyway, in order to keep things slightly below the level, unless the viewer really wants to do some digging, and also be mindful that these are families that have lost their loved ones. And another sign also, and I went through this too, is bedwetting. So often children who are under this will wet the bed a lot, because you're put to sleep for so long. We're also dehydrated and starved, but we're often toileted by the handlers, more often than not. But they'll also shame you by, you wake up and all of a sudden you've wet the bed, and you had you couldn't have got there anyway, because the last minute before you're woken up, and then you just burst. Yeah, they'll do things like that to people. And publicly humiliate people too, like business people working in jobs. There was like a lot of them were joggers. There was a big wave of joggers a few years ago who were jogging around, under programming, and they were given lots of diuretics and laxatives, and all of a sudden they would suddenly have to go, and it was going to come out, so they would just go in someone's backyard or something and get photographed or whatever, or be programmed to do the same place all the time, and it's like humiliation for them as well. So they would lose their jobs and things like that if they wanted them to lose their jobs for some reason.
That humiliation again, right? It's just such a common tactic.
And to do with shit again and things like that, and bodily movements, and often a lot of us have distended stomachs after a while too, because of the drugging and the loss of the muscles.
Malnutrition, so I would say too, like just you just wouldn't be eating regularly enough to have proper nutrition.
Up the nose, like nosebleeds a lot. I get very triggered when even a friend said to me recently, "Oh, my daughter gets nosebleeds a lot," and that's a huge trigger for me. I'm like, oh no. And I can't help that, because we had so many nosebleeds, and seen other loved ones have nosebleeds, and other families, and it's just part of it, because of the tubing down the nose to feed us, and because we're put under so long. And we can vomit, choke on our own vomit. We have food in our bellies, but we still have to be fed. At one stage, they got me down to 39 kilos. They wanted to aim for 36, which my nana was, because my father had a big thing about being like my nana, his mother. She was about 36 kilos just before she passed after a certain accident that they caused. But I was so thin because I'm 5'7", and to be that thin, like my spine stuck out. And that was at a certain height of being taken to things in 1997, 96, 97, 98, 99. I was extremely thin. Like my mouth took up most of my face. I still have a couple of photos left. I'll bring them out in future interviews, some of the photos, and you wouldn't even recognize me as a full beta slave at 40. Wouldn't even know it was me. I'll get one on my phone now, actually, just to give people an idea of how they used to present me. That's one of the looks that they had for me at age 40, and the handlers were right in front of me there.
Wow.
Doesn't even look like me. That's
yeah, look at your face. Like, you look so
under
thin. Yeah.
And that's only 12, 13 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Another thing they did as children was they'd give us warts, and that would be painful too. So that's another witch thing. I had lots of warts on my hands, and they would give them to you. And I've seen them do that to future children, where they would have a handler with a lot of warts, and they do that by injecting or whatever, infecting people with warts, and then they will grab the child's hand, and next thing you're taking the child to the doctor all the time, and the handlers are all around walking through. You'll see the child look, know that person, and then look away. The person goes, and the child doesn't mention anything, because that's what scopolamine does. And you'll see that child look, or you'll see that person look and see the handler, and then you'll watch their reaction, and then they've forgotten all about it.
There's nothing there. Yeah, no recognition. Yeah.
Because I was pulled out into more awareness, I was able to recognize a lot of that, even though I was washed at the end of it every night, and maybe a little bit longer, maybe 10, 12 seconds later, I've forgotten. Sometimes they pulled me right out into a longer space of time before something else would take effect with accelerants in the system. And they called it decelerants, even though they said there's nothing like decelerants, but they'd use something to slow things down, make them come out. So it's all the cocktail, the timing, everything was timed. There's another thing that happened around when I was 17, because we're at 17 now. And I found this out later, that there was a man with a medium man with a name Law in his name, and his first name was my father's name. And he brought out a lot of gory details under programming about a murder that I was taken to of a woman to do with the copper corn. He brought out all the gory details into the public consciousness, because that's what they wanted. They wanted more and more gory details to come out. And that further made the public very angry against the boys that they had placed at the scene to take. And I think one died in jail, so he never came out of jail in 50 years. I think one's died or two have died. Some of them are brothers. So they'll attack whole families. Imagine being a mother and 2 or 3 of your sons have accused of one of the heinous crimes at the time. And it was all made public by this man with the name Law through the media. So they were controlling the media a long time. And that was stepped up from the Lane in the Chamber murder that I was taken to as an 11, 12-year-old, where they also controlled the media too, against the mother, to convict a mother of killing her baby.
God. It's at the point now, it's just like anything you see in the media is a complete lie. It's just
even bizarre. Yeah, they're getting more and more bizarre and more horrific times. And then they'll do an ordinary one. They do across the board. They don't do Sometimes they'll do repetitive ones, but with a little twist. They really have fun with it. And it keeps people on edge. It keeps people anxious.
That fear programming, right? We need safety. We need our government to look after us. Yeah, whatever.
It's controlled. Yeah. So it's all like an endless cycle of abuse. It's just an endless cycle. And this is all to bring into public consciousness what they were doing. The absolute depravity of things that I've seen are just, honestly, I really feel for other survivors, because I still don't know how I can get up every day after seeing what I've seen, and the amount that I've seen, and the way it was done. And yeah, it stains into your brain, and you live with that for the rest of your life. What you've seen, the visual was very, very potent, and it stamps into you. You never unsee it. You never unsee what you've seen. You know, every country has this, with horrific things done by military and governments. I don't know for sure anymore, but certain things, because of all my training and my programming, I know instantly, yeah, that's them. So I'll go back to Antarctica now, because I had more memories. It started with that hum happening again, that I can't control, and someone had triggered that hum. So there was more. And I knew when that person was triggering it, I knew exactly what she was doing. I knew exactly, I'm being triggered by this person right now. And this is a person that had hounded me for a long, long time, unwittingly, to catch up with her. I'd only met her once a year ago, and a year later, she's taken me to a thing that was very triggering. It was sort of reminiscent of The Handmaid's Tale. And I remember being in there, this is quite recently, thinking, oh no, I feel like I'm in a trap right now. And then she turned around halfway through it and said some stuff that completely triggered me. And then the hum started to happen again. So this is how they work. So I remember that. I think I've spoken about this already, about being on that snow buggy. We've come out of the hovercraft vessel that went over the waves, and my head was smashing against the floor. My younger brother was there as well and woke us up. And it's pointed to and said, this is the first time that they'd said the zodiac. That's the zodiac, but you won't see the name on it on the actual hovercraft. It's the one called the zodiac. Something had been scrubbed out. And I remember looking, and it's hard to see because your eyes are so hurting with the glare of Antarctica too. Like, it was summer. It was definitely summer in Antarctica. Still snow everywhere and ice, but there was sunlight there on that day, coming and going, very glary. So I know it could have been around my birthday. They often did things very significantly around my birthday, which was the height of summer. And in the snow buggy, the man with the black hair and the big puffer jacket, I'm underdressed. My little brother in the back's underdressed as well for our ride to where we're going. He was saying, this is your first big mission. You're not going to believe what you're about to see. And then he'd pause and do. So it was an endless conversation. So the whole time in the buggy, he was talking to me, ignoring my little brother in the back, and then smashing him back again whenever, because he had a mirror angle to look at him, whenever he'd fall forward quite violently. And then I was taken into the room with the red lights, the dwelling, like a makeshift wooden hut thing that was there. There were other dwellings around when we first got there. And the big peak of a mountain was on our right. So we went around the left of that. And that's when I saw that Scottish man that they were laughing at and mocking and saying the Flying Scotsman and everything like that. And I went into beta mode, jerking and everything. And I remember him saying, oh, no, don't do this. Don't do that, because it was something sexual that I was having to perform on him under all the drugging and everything. So it's only a glimpse, and then I blanked out. After that, I remember talking about being at the near the ocean side, and the orca was said by one of the master programmers. He had lighter coloured hair. I remember being so happy to be out of where I'd been,
but I didn't know where I'd been. And they had the man, and he was gone. But where I'd been brought from, I've had memories now of being taken with a lot of men, walked to a door, slightly up an incline. We stood at the door for a while. They were talking to me, making eye contact, a couple of the master programmers about to take me in. And one of them was saying did I know what a nonagon was, or would it be a heptagon or a hexagon? And that I wouldn't believe what I was about to see. And it was very important, and rah, 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 things like that. I remember feeling that I know that I've come from behind me, might have looked over my shoulder and seen, yeah, there's some dwelling. So I know that I was in around the same spot. And the big mountain I could see in there that would come around, I could see that. Gone through the door, and inside the door's shut. It's freezing. I'm still underdressed, but I still have slightly warmer clothes on than what I had been taken there in. They've dressed me up a little bit warmer for this jacket or something, not as heavy as theirs, but enough to keep me still cold, enough to stay awake, which is what they do. This is why they train a lot of their men and take people to Antarctica, to keep us awake as well. I remember congregating there. They're still talking to me, all focused on me, which is weird because I'm a child. So I'm 9 at this age, and the connotation with nonagon too. I think that's a 9-sided geometrical pattern. And through my schooling and potential programming, I was just at that time before that learning about geometrical and what they were named, but I couldn't quite get what a nonagon was, or a heptagon, or a hexagon. I knew one of them. I think I got that nonagon was 9 or something, or hexagon was 6, or one of them I knew, but the others I didn't know. And he only said those 3. Is it a heptagon? Is it a nonagon? You know, on and on like that in their cryptic way. And then I'm taken around to the right as I'm going down. Stephen is in front of me, but I didn't know his name was Stephen then, even though he'd been at my school for a couple of months earlier, much earlier. And right then, one of them behind me said, watch your step. And right at that instant was a step, not just an incline. And I remember thinking, or thought programmed, oh, I would have fallen then. And it was very awful. If you fell, you were kicked or whatever. So I was lucky, feeling thought programmed to feel, thank goodness I looked then. Kept going around and down on an incline. And then there was like mesh, you know, that metal mesh kind of fabrication that we're walking on, that you can see through underneath. Some of it was steps, and then it was flooring with the mesh. And then around there was like where we stopped next, and there was maybe 9 or 10 men with us, including Stephen. Then I remember noticing Stephen for the first time. I thought again, because I was put under noticing that he's in front of me. And there was like a lift that we were facing, and there was a big talk about, we're not going to take you down the lift this time. So maybe I had been there before. Not that I have any memories of that. This is our store lift for all our equipment. And there was laughter, like it was an inside joke. So they took a lot of equipment down this lift. It was one of those old lifts that you pull with the metal axes. And there'd been one like that in my hometown that I went to later that would really trigger me. And I was always taken there. There was a handler there, and he'd slam it and look at me. So it was like triggering me. So they would bring things back into your life. And that was when I was in my mid-teenage years. So this is when I'm 9. And then we're taken further down, and then we're taken through a door. I've never seen anything like it. Massive, massive room, covered in ice. And there's this, they turn a switch, and there's this blue light, like a geometric pattern underneath the ice, and it's making everything glow. And there's water also running over it, obviously maybe the thing is hot or something, I don't know, it's cooling it. And I was stood there to wait. And Stephen has been given a signal and he's rushed, just like he started shooting the chicken straight away. He's rushed straight across it. You could see him splashing on it and not skidding or anything. And there's talk about that it's really slippery, that I'll have to be careful when I go on it, rah, rah, rah. And I still don't know to this day what shape this is in, whether it was a hexagon, whether it was a heptagon or nonagon or whatever. And then I was taken on it. And then I remember seeing the Scottish men, and I don't know what they did to him there, but when I was out, and the seal, he had lost his mind.
Mm.
And I just remember when I was walking across it very carefully, I started to jerk. So they were putting me through into another altar with whatever happened there. So I don't have any more memories about that at the moment. But this is a significant area to do with their training, and I don't know what it's all about. It could be that the young deltas think that they have superpowers on this thing, or maybe the thing is a certain thing that has a meaning or a use.
Certainly not technology that we're aware of, right? Yeah.
A big piping of colours, like blue colour through it. I don't know whether they changed the colours, but it was blue at that time. And a lot of stuff was said to me about that before I was taken on, but I don't have access to that at the moment. It was just too much information coming in. It was a very, very scary thing that they were doing down there. And I don't know whether it was just the Delta training to make them believe that they had superpowers or something.
Well, we know that, the cold regions have been used for so much training by the cults. So it's very interesting, your recollection of just, some of the technology and training that's going on down there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm bringing forward is one of the highest, what I believe is the highest level of mind control. And with this, you don't have human will, and will is a big word. Even the name William, Will I am was said to me many times, and they made a mockery of it. And the plants just take over with the concoctions that they make and their knowledge that they've taken, and the coercion and torture and everything that they use in order to make a complete reversal of human will. And they completely washed me again and again and again, so that I didn't even have any memories. I just completely lived in the now. Another thing that they did was they really confused me a lot with my handlers around age 17. I remember being coerced to go to a nightclub by friends at another stage. And after that nightclub, drink there as well, like drugged everywhere we were going. Went to a park, and out of the trees came a young man. He said he was 15, and I kept thinking he looked familiar. Could have been Stephen. Said that he was in Linton Army Reserve, said his name was Carlos, kept sneering at me. The others would look and then they'd forget. Obviously, scopolamine, whatever is in their system. And then another one called Carlos came into my life many years later to do with a purple truck, and the name of my actual twin brother, who was another person with the same name that they killed. So they're always confusing you with who they were. They would also diet the deltas to be quite thin, then chubby them out, change their faces, change their hair color too. Like sometimes Simon had black hair at a certain age. The rest of the time it was blonde. My hair color changed a lot as well, especially in my younger years. It was bowl cut and bleached, and then darkened, and it would always change. But I remember this time in this park. So there was a lot to do with the actual training of the deltas was done quite often in little military camps. And one in my hometown, Palmerston North End, was called Linton Army Reserve. And even friends that I first went to uni with there, when I was allowed to go to uni for a few months, they got jobs there as well. So it was quite a network to do with the military back then, younger training as well. And their forefront alters, these men, these deltas, as well as they'd have training at Antarctica and different places of the world with the programmers and handlers, other handlers. Another thing that they did was they set up many events around that age, 17, attacks on me to make me feel very unsafe and give me memories, little bits of longer memories that this was happening. Men in cars trying to rape me, back, out the front of my house when I was locked out, things like that. A carload of boys being controlled by Sel's nephew, imposter, almost taking me out on a bike, but not, because Sel's nephew was controlling the steering wheel from the back seat of this little Mini that they were in, crashing into a traffic light and then blaming me for it. Like, police came and all the boys had a different story, that I had caused the accident on a bicycle. And then I saw Sel's nephew get out of the car and he was laughing. Like, I could see him in the back when it happened, and he forced the car into the traffic light with one of the boys that they had under and his friend in the front seat and another one in the back seat with them, all under scopolamine. And then later on, it was like an insurance claim where I apparently owed $1,000. First time at uni, wouldn't have been able to pay. And one of the town gossip boys from my school was programmed to see me bicycle into a brothel, and he was the one that was working at the insurance company. So then he had a vendetta against me. So it was all things set up for me to leave town. And with this accident too, also I saw Sel's nephew imposter get into a car with who I now know as Carlos and drive off laughing. Right in broad daylight. Got out of the car that he'd forced crash in the middle of the day and hop into another car waiting for him and driven off. So this is what they can do in broad daylight. And no one will say anything or remember, because I remember the car crash. Then he'll just sneak off at the right time. And this happened many times. I've got many more car crashes that I saw where they were doing this to people. And some of these people even went to jail for it when they were either drugged and someone was driving the wheel from behind. That's how they broke my back. Same thing happened. Sel's nephew imposter was driving that one, and I got hit by that car and broke my back in 3 places. That was done on purpose. Much later, when I was 22, 23. So these are the kind of things that they were setting up. So back to the trafficking that happened when I was 16, 17. I was living with one of my friends, because they moved me around 6 or 7 times into different little flats within a time space that I thought was 8 or 9 months, but it was actually only 2 or 3 months. So they made me believe this is how they conflate time. So I was actually trafficked to Christchurch way before this, and that's to do with after Chernobyl, which I'll get to probably next session now because we're running out of time. And I remember my father came into the flat that I was sharing with my friend. Just before that, I'd been into a health shop and one of the handlers was there, and I remember getting a whole lot of glazed cherries and then afterwards thinking, are these drugged, like thought controlled? And then it was gone. taking them home. And then my friend got out some orange juice. It was often put in the orange juice. I had a big drink. She left because she was under programming to leave. Next thing, I woke up on the bed and my father's in the room. And there's a telephone that he's brought in on a big long cord, one of those old phones that we had back in the 80s. And he's got a newspaper with him. He always had a newspaper, a lot to do with like programming through the news and the media that they use. He'd circled a place called Tate. And he's like, make the call. You're going to go in there. You're a prostitute. You're a whore. Make the call. Make the call. And I remember jolting awake, and I pick up the phone and look, and I put the phone down and hear the voice behind me. It's still him. Make the call. Then he'd come and he'd circle it again, and he'd tell me what to say on the phone because I was blank. And I remember a woman answered, and eventually I had written down a time. He'd made me write down the time that she said to come in. Didn't want to. Thought, you always think you won't do it. You have to do what they're saying at the time, but you always think, I'll get out of it. I'll make sure I don't. Next thing, I remember taking off on my bicycle, and all of a sudden, Stephen Simon was to my left behind me, and he's talking to me, and I'm under all these concoction of drugs, telling me that he's going to kill my brothers if I don't stop peddling. If I stop peddling, that I'm going to go into a place, it's going to be on the right, further up the road. Kept repeating that he'd kill my brothers if I didn't do what I was being told to do, to go into this place, escort agency. Told that if I didn't care about my brothers being killed, that they'd kill my friend who I was living with. On and on it went. I remember getting closer to where he said it was, and it was towards a corner. It might have been on a corner. And I remember thinking, thought controlled, we'll just go up the driveway, because one of them was coming towards me just before the driveway, giving me a death stare. So I knew I had to turn right, was being told to turn right by Simon. And I thought, one of my thoughts was, well, I'll go in and then I'll dump the bicycle and I'll jump the fence out the side. There must be a way through. And when I went in there, of course, one of the men in suits comes from that end, around that house towards me. And I'm like, oh no, now I've got to go in. So I remember knocking on the door, being told to knock on the door. It's opened immediately by a wizened looking woman. Told me to come in. Her name was Nina. Second brothel manager that I was put with was Betty. And years later, a friend of mine and I had nicknames, Nina and Betty. So they would bring this back to you as well, even though I didn't have memory of this back then. This is way back in 2007, much later. So this is the 1980s. So Nina's taken me in, and I remember she pulled up the seat really close to me, and the phone kept ringing. And she's on the phone, and then she's going into her bedroom, and I can hear voices in there, a man's voice, and then she's come out with more information. And she's telling me to open my purse and that I'll find something in there. And it was condoms. And my father had put them in my purse. Normally, they don't do that. Normally, if I was a bit older or whatever, they would have had me go out and buy these condoms. And that, she said, another time she went in, came out, normally girls like you come along and then you don't go through with it. We're going to make sure that you go through with this. And I'm slumping in my seat thinking, I'm so tired. I don't think I can even run or get away, but they're out there. And then thinking later on, I just don't think I can go outside. I didn't know why I couldn't go outside by then. So the memories would fade. Then she brought in a lady from outside the door, and it was my best friend's mother that I'd been taken to her house. She was a foster mother. So my best friend a long time ago, when I was about 13, was fostered. And she was the one that was brought out by a master programmer and said, if you don't do it to her, we'll do it to your daughter. I think I've talked about that in a past interview. It was her, but I didn't know it was her because I'm in another altar. And her name was Val. And they brought other people around me much later on called Val, Valerie. They'll always repeat things like that to keep you in check. And she was told by Nina, make sure you walk her to the door and make sure she doesn't run, and push her through the door if you have to. And so I'm put in the car and I'm driven to this hotel, and I'm walked up the corridor to the door right at the end, and it's opened, and there's a master programmer in there. He's got the lighter hair, and these men are big men in suits, like they wear large suits. They're very heavy men. Terrifying. I remember walking in there, and the last thing she said was, don't even think about coming out straight away, because I'll just make sure you go back in. And I got in there, and he was very cold and methodical. He said certain things about it, like just shut your eyes, you can go to another place, things like that were said to me. He gave me money, told me that I was full beta slave, all this kind of stuff. He ordered me onto the bed. He raped me. It was very cold and methodical. I think my head was banging into the wall, really hurt. And I just remember thinking, nothing matters anymore. Nothing matters anymore. So that was basically the start of my real trafficking. And I was basically put to sleep, woken up, taken to this place. And then the boy across the road, the town gossip, he spread around all my peers that I was working there. My reward was I was allowed to use the money to buy nice things for a while. I was put into many different flats, moved here and there, thinking I was like 2 months or 2.5 months in a place, whereas it was only maybe half a week.
Wow.
And then eventually I was taken to Christchurch, and that was a different form of trafficking. So every time that they would do it, I had at least 5 different ways that they did it. So when I was taken to Christchurch, I'll talk about the different way that they got me in, which was more drugging in a different way, and coerced to go down there, trapped to go down there by somebody, and then things would change. And you'd always have program thoughts, oh, I can get away, I can get out of this, I'll just go, I won't go with them, I'll go with someone else, and then you can't. There's no way out.
So awful that they used the threat of hurting people around you as well. Like I hear that so often with survivors, you know, you've got a supposed choice of whether you go through with what they're asking you to do or not, but then they're threatening the people that you love. So it's they take that choice away, and they cause you to break to make that choice. Do you know what I mean? Like you use your own will. So it's just such an awful violation.
Yeah. But they didn't even need to do that. I mean, under these drugs, they didn't even need to do that. It's just part of their narrative. Everything's videoed. Yeah.
So much coercion.
So much coercion.
Yeah.
They don't even need the coercion in some cases, because it's just a front story for you. Sometimes some of the things they use is a front story for you. I couldn't remember all of that. All I knew was I was working there. I didn't know the past. I didn't know and you're always blocked from even thinking that. They keep you in a state of absolute just now, unless they program a thought of a memory. Sometimes they'll use memories as a reward, like you might remember a nice thing that happened when you were a child. You might be given that memory. That's also a reward, not just gems or diamonds or amethysts or whatever color you're allowed to have, because all the colors have meanings, or a certain object that you're allowed to have, or a reward is time with a loved one. It's awful. Yeah, so with uni, I was at uni at the time as well. I found it impossible to study. I couldn't focus on anything, and this is also the drugging. And then I felt shame and stupidity that I couldn't, because I'd been so good at school with the top marks through programming as well. I don't even know how many times I went out to the uni. I think I counted on one hand. whereas they made me feel like I was there for 9 months. This is how they conflate time for you. And they do this to many people. People don't have any idea that they've lost so many weeks, months, years, some cases. Drugs from the plants.
That's it. And that time loss is definitely a big sign of being accessed, right?
And you don't even know you've lost time when you're in it.
Until later, yeah.
Sometimes you do later, yeah. But you're not aware of it at the time. You think that every time you shut your eyes and go to sleep, you wake up, it's another day. And you don't know that there's been maybe months in between where you've been taken all different places all over the world. And that even play tricks on me, like, oh, I would be saying to people, no, I've never seen the snow. I've never been around the snow. Because that's your forefront. You don't know that you've been taken to Antarctica from a child, or different places where there's been snow overseas, Belarus, Ukraine, different places. You have no idea. Canada. And so you'd say to people, I've never seen the snow. Let's finish up by saying to survivors, just be careful of any support groups. Just do your checking on them. Things may not be what they seem. People can have different agendas, especially with us survivors.
So true.
I wanted to thank you, Gabby, for having Monica on recently at the AA.
Oh, isn't she wonderful? She's such a wonderful spokesperson for all of the victims of AA. And she is harassed incessantly for that as well. So go, Monica. You're a very brave and courageous woman, and brilliant documentary, right?
Yeah, thank you for bringing her on, and all the other interviews. We've managed to see a couple more since we've had a break. And it's a sad fact that even groups will try and alienate us survivors from each other too. That can often happen in survivor groups. And it's funny because as survivors, we're more supporters than a lot of people. We have a lot within us that can support others. We do have a lot of strength and reserve. So it reminds me of someone that always says, not just a survivor, you're a supporter too.
So true.
We do support a lot of people, and we do have that strength and reserve, but we are human. We're not here to be abused just because we open up about our lives. It's really hard. I'd just like to remind the viewer of that. And don't let others tell you that you're not ready to speak out. You'll know yourself when you're ready to speak out. And we're a collective story. And that's another thing I have to say is be careful with the words that you use. Like, it's not good enough to say, I believe I had scopolamine. I think I was targeted in the womb. That just does us survivors, it discredits us, because we know we have the hard facts, we have the hard memories. You can't just say that you believe or you think that's happened to you because it's happened to another survivor. Don't say things like that until you have the memories, because that just does us a disservice, and for what we're trying to talk out about to help this world and to help this world heal.
Very well said, Nellie. I think it's so important that survivors rely on sharing their own lived experiences, because that's where the true power is, both to heal supporters and other survivors listening. That's a truth, our lived truth. We need to be so careful, because there is so much misinformation out there, and it's easy to get carried away with that, or having listened to someone else, compare it to your own ideas, but what your lived experience is the truth that you can share with the world. So I think that's a really important point. So, and thank you so much for sharing so candidly today your experiences being trafficked. It's a really horrific side of generational families, and it's so, it literally is part of every generational child child's upbringing to various degrees. And I hope that other survivors listening to, your experiences that were done, through a brothel, so through a very extreme situation with very high level programming, it'll help other survivors, come to terms with what they're remembering. And most importantly, as survivors, let's hand the shame back, because, the choices that you were perceivedly given about what you were able to do were not choices at all. It was force, it was coercion. That shame deserves to be worn by the abusers, by the handlers, and by the people that got you into that position, whether they were parents, grandparents, uncles, aunties, the works, you know what I mean? That's where the shame belongs. So thank you so much for sharing, Nellie. And I know that will be just so beautifully healing for so many that are working through their memories at this time.
Thank you. I want to wish all the other survivors the best, and I look forward to hearing their stories when they're ready. And thank all the other survivors who have already shared.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nellie.
Thank you, Gabby.